Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into what is easily one of the most absurd, hilarious, and honestly fascinating political protests in modern history. We're traveling back to 1959 to the bustling streets of Sao Paulo, Brazil, for a story about democracy, deep frustration, and a completely unexpected candidate who absolutely upended the political establishment. So, let's start with a question. When the political system feels fundamentally broken, how do you make your voice heard? I mean, when you look around your city and feel like none of the leaders actually care about the daily struggles of the people, what's the most effective way to send a message? You could just stay home and not vote, or you could do something that ensures those politicians will literally never forget your anger. Well, in 1959, the deeply frustrated people of Sao Paulo found a massive 230-kilogram answer. Meet Cacareco. She was a rhinoceros, and she wasn't just some novelty act either. She was a genuine write-in candidate who ended up securing an unbelievable 100,000 votes in a real, high-stakes municipal election.
Section 1. An unlikely candidate.
To understand exactly how a rhino won a major election in what is now the world's 8th largest city, we kind of need to look at the candidate herself. Cacareco was a 4-year-old female rhinoceros, born back in 1954 to her parents Britador and Teresina. And get this, she wasn't even a local resident. Weighing a hefty 230 kilograms, she was actually just a temporary loner. She was sent from the Rio de Janeiro Zoo in March 1958 just to help inaugurate the new Sao Paulo Zoo. But despite being a tourist, she captured the public's imagination way more than any local politician ever did. Section 2. The perfect storm. So what actually drives voters away from humans and toward the local zoo for political leadership? People don't just vote for a giant land mammal without a really good reason. Well, the citizens of Sao Paulo were completely 100% fed up. They were dealing with unpaved, messy, just extremely dirty streets. Public works projects were left totally unfinished, basically sitting there as daily monuments to government failure. On top of all that, you had rampant political corruption and devastating food shortages, especially in the poorer districts. It was a miserable situation, and the public's patience had just entirely run out. And the crazy thing is, it wasn't for a lack of political options. There were actually 540 candidates competing for just 45 city council seats. But despite having over 500 politicians aggressively vying for their votes, the citizens felt completely unrepresented by their human options. It turns out having more choices definitely didn't mean having better choices. The rallying cry of this whole movement was just brilliant. Mejor elige un rinoceronte que un asno. Better elect a rhino than an ass. Proposed by a group of university students and a journalist who wanted to protest the shockingly low caliber of those 540 competitors, this slogan perfectly captured the mood. It was witty, it was biting, and the message was so incredibly clear that it even made its way into the international press, landing a spot in Time magazine. Section 3. Landslide Victory. Now, the campaign moved from a street joke to actual printed ballots. When Election Day finally arrived on October 4th, 1959, the sheer scale of the protest left the entire country in shock. Remember, at the time, voters used paper ballots where they had to write in a candidate's name manually. They had to take the time to physically pen in their choice. And an astounding 100,000 people took their pens and wrote down Cacareco. Now compare that to this number, 10,000. That was the meager total secured by the leading human candidate. So, let that sink in. The rhino beat the most popular politician tenfold. It was an absolute wipeout. Literally no political party even came close to matching the massive wave of support that Cacareco received. And the insult to the political class? It was highly intentional and deeply ironic. You see, the name Cacareco literally translates to trash or garbage in Portuguese. So the voters of São Paulo weren't just picking a random cute animal name, they were sending a crystal clear message to the political elite. They were basically saying, we think your governance is garbage, so we are officially voting for garbage. Section 4. Political Fallout. Naturally, the human politicians did not take this massive landslide defeat to a zoo animal very well. Completely missing the point of the citizens' anger, defensive politicians immediately went into denial. Instead of looking in the mirror and, addressing the dirty streets or the food shortages, they actually blamed Cacareco's victory on shadowy conspiracies. They pointed fingers at sinister forces and claimed there were hidden interests at play. Even the president of Brazil at the time had to carefully step around it, saying he'd just wait for the people's own interpretations of the event. And it wasn't just the politicians. Even the zoo director felt the need to pile on. He pointed out the supposed absurdity of the situation, aggressively calling his own rhino an ugly, stupid beast and stating you could fit her entire brain inside a walnut. In the immediate aftermath, the authorities obviously stepped in. Ironically, Cacareco wasn't even in São Paulo for her big victory. She'd already been shipped back to Rio a few days before the vote. Predictably, officials officially nullified all 100,000 of her votes, forcing the organization of a brand new election. But, the damage to the political establishment's ego was totally done. The sheer humiliation of losing to a rhino left a deep mark. And in one very tragic case, the public rejection was so severe that one defeated candidate actually ended up taking his own life. Section 5. A lasting legacy. Cacareco may have been a one-term phenomenon, but her impact became immortal. She actually birthed a whole new term, voto Cacareco. To this very day in Brazil, if a citizen decides to cast a ballot out of pure spite, protest, or deep frustration against the establishment, it's commonly referred to as a voto Cacareco. Her name literally became synonymous with the whole concept of a democratic punishment vote. And Cacareco's spirit lived on globally, too. In 1959, she shocked São Paulo. Then, just a few years later, in 1963, a group in Canada founded the satirical Rhinoceros Party. They were directly inspired by her legacy, claiming to be her spiritual descendants and making these wildly extravagant promises just to mock politicians. And then, decades later, in 1988, Brazil saw history rhyme when Macaco Tian, a monkey, won a staggering 400,000 votes for mayor of Rio de Janeiro. That actually landed him in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most voted for monkey in the world. As for the trailblazer herself, sadly, Cacareco passed away prematurely from acute nephritis in December 1962, when she was just 8 years old. But she is definitely not forgotten. In 1984, her remains were brought back to the city that elected her, and today you can still visit her on exhibition at the University of São Paulo's Veterinary Anatomy Museum. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. It really leaves us with this fascinating thought. If a 230-kilogram zoo animal can overwhelmingly defeat more than 500 human politicians, what does that really tell us about the fragility of political trust? When the bond between the government and the people is completely shattered, is a vote for garbage the most powerful, peaceful, democratic statement a citizen can possibly make? It's a profound question, and one that remains just as relevant today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope this deep dive gave you a completely new perspective on the true power of a protest vote.